First, I just want to thank you so much for honoring me and Block Club and our colleague Dave Jackson at the BJ with this award. I am a terrible public speaker, even digitally, so please forgive me if I fumble a couple words. But one thing that I think is important to note is that Block Club started because we used to have a more traditional newsroom owned by a millionaire, and he shut it down without warning one day, just leaving dozens of journalists without a job. The editors of that old publication, DNA Info, then started our nonprofit newsroom, Block Club Chicago. We rely on memberships and on donations, grants to keep us going. And we've just found it to be so much more sustainable with the support from readers that we get. And then with these stories, so in December 2021, Chicago got its first COVID-19 vaccine doses. It administered the first shots at Loretto Hospital, which is a safety net facility that serves the most vulnerable people in Chicago. It did that to show Chicago would prioritize shots for Chicagoans of color and low-income people who had been most affected by COVID-19. We all know how things were a year ago. Vaccines were super rare. They were limited to the most at-risk people like healthcare professionals or elderly folks. People would stay up all night trying to get appointments for their loved ones, only to still struggle for weeks. So while this was all happening, we got a tip from a reader. They told us that ineligible people had been vaccinated at Trump Tower in Chicago. We dug deep into this, figuring out that the vaccinations had occurred, who had been vaccinated, and then we learned who had been the provider that gave those vaccinations, and it was none other than Loretto Hospital. Our first story detailed those vaccinations, but then we learned about more. We learned that the CFO of Loretto actually lived at Trump Tower, had told people he was buddies with Eric Trump, and had arranged for this event to occur. And from there, our readers reached out to us with more tips. They have a deep trust in us, a lot of loyalty toward Block Club. And with their help, we were able to find sources who confirmed Loretto had also wrongfully vaccinated people in the suburbs at a luxury jewelry and watch shop where the CFO was known to spend tens of thousands of dollars, and at a high-end steakhouse where steaks cost hundreds of bucks. We got those tips because our readers trust us, and because they appreciated our reporting and wanted to make sure these things came to light. At the same time, my editors at Block Club cut me loose from my day-to-day stories and responsibilities that I usually worked on. That way I could dive deep into these stories. I don't think that that would have been possible at a traditional newsroom with the way things are now. But at Block Club, they just believe so wholeheartedly in this kind of work that they allowed me to put my all into it for weeks. As a result, we saw the city remove vaccine doses from Loretto's control. It set up its own program to ensure vulnerable Chicagoans could get the shots they needed to stay safe from COVID-19. The hospital's CFO resigned after we revealed all of his ties to these improper vaccination events. The FBI started investigating some of these vaccinations. And actually, just earlier this month, the hospital announced its CEO is also leaving. But we were still getting more tips about the questionable conduct at Loretto itself. I turned to Dave Jackson at the BJ, who I think is one of the best journalists in the country, and of course is also getting an Izzy Award for a separate story he worked on this year. And I asked him to be my reporting partner and my mentor to look into more of those tips. Together, we highlighted how the hospital CFO's close friend and business partner had been awarded millions of dollars worth of contracts at Loretto, which is a publicly funded facility. We showed how Illinois Senate Majority Leader had gotten campaign donations and Caribbean trips from the hospital. We showed how the hospital's quality of care had declined under new leadership, even though it serves the most vulnerable people in the city. And we highlighted how the FBI and the Illinois Attorney General's office were investigating the hospital after our stories. Those reports and the impact they made would not have been possible if not for the tips we got from our readers and the partnership provided by Jackson. It really inspires me to see the change that a small, scrappy newsroom like Block Club can make in a major city. Again, this isn't some traditional newsroom. We only opened in 2018, but we're already helping take care of folks and hold power to account. And I think one of the coolest things that really came out of this, and one of the most inspiring things for me, is to see how nonprofit newsrooms like Block Club and the BGA are teaming up to tell these kinds of stories. Jackson showed me so much of what he knows and has allowed me to then use that information in future stories so that we can make sure that there is more transparency in Chicago. And I think that that just helps ensure that power is held to account and vulnerable people are protected.